Hey guys, new angle, same cracked glass causing a weird bloom on that side of the screen. Whatever. I want to talk about the Middle East peace deals, and I'm going to throw in there the Serbia, Bosnia stuff. So, President has a massive win. Basically, all these Sunni Arab states are getting together and realizing that the world is a lot better when you recognize your neighbor and don't fund people who call for their extermination. Um, we're a couple generations. There's a couple reasons this is happening. One is we're a couple generations removed from basically the ancestors, and literally direct ancestors in a lot of these cases, because it's kingdoms. Their forefathers who attacked Israel when they first popped up, and tried to wipe them out. We're a couple generations away from the wars, and these people now who are in charge of these bigger Middle Eastern countries, either they themselves or their children have been educated in the West. They have been around the world. They've been to the United States. They've been to all these different places. Some of them have even visited Israel just to see what it is. And they very quickly realize that, they don't want to live in dirt in the third world. They don't want to live like the way the Palestinians live. And they don't want to live like the rural Pakistan where radical Islam basically dominates, and it's one of those shithole countries, as they say. They don't want to be Somalia. They just want to be, wealthy, and they basically want to run their kingdoms like corporations. And their big trading partner they're missing out on is Israel. And not only are they the big trading partner being with the Israelis, they also miss out on opportunities in the United States because they're not playing nice with the Israelis. It's money. It's good money. We're luckily far enough away from basically what happened in the 70s. Carter, to his credit, helped negotiate basically peace between Anwar al-Sadat, who was Egypt's dictator at the time, and prime minister, and basically in Israel. Israel and Egypt have been fighting back and forth for a while. Sadat himself sent his forces to go retake the Sinai Peninsula, and he was actually successful. It was really the only time the Israelis have ever been pushed out of a position. Really tough situation. Israelis were ready to fight to the death, and the Egyptians were a lot more powerful and a lot more better motivated than they had been in the past. And it really looked like this actually could be a flashpoint for World War III breaking out because of who was allied with who. Sadat then basically realized the rest of these Arab countries, they are just going to basically continually drag him into war with either essentially Israel and then eventually the United States, and then those people were going to probably stab him in the back. And he also would just much rather basically Egypt develop on its own and be able to trade with the West and the East. And so what if you have to recognize that Israel's a country? Like, they're not going to be able to hold the territory. If they go in and they take over Israel and then they start doing stuff to the Jews, the rest of the world's going to come down on them. Like, it's not worth it. It's not worth it. If you're unless you're our radical and you fully believe that you need to exterminate the Jews for whatever reason, you don't gain anything strategically by being the one who puts your neck on the line to go, hurt the Israelis, to go wipe them out. So Sadat, Western educated, brings Israel to the table, and the Israelis are really happy that an Arab country is actually going to recognize their existence, and particularly because it's a very powerful Arab country that they share a border with. This benefits both sides greatly, and they go to the White House, they sign their peace treaty, and what happens? Well, in Israel, it's celebrated. They're kind of just surprised. They don't really trust the Egyptians, but at the same time, this is a huge step in the right direction. But Sadat goes home, and the Muslim Brotherhood kills him. They kill him. They kill somebody for making peace with the Jews, because that's what the Muslim Brotherhood does. So the Muslim Brotherhood has been a thorn in the side and basically really influencing Middle Eastern politics since that time, really since before that time. And they're essentially the remnants of the, basically, they're part of the same. They trace their lineage all the way back to World War II, where basically the Mufti of Palestine allied himself with the German Nazis. This is true. He allied essentially the Palestine with the Nazis, and then when the Allies came back in and retook basically the Middle East areas that they had control over, the Palestine was completely lost, and then basically they were able to move essentially the Israelis there, the Jews there, because this mufti decided that basically the Nazis were the way to go, and the Muslim Brotherhood is basically the direct genesis of that, and they are super not happy about the fact that the West essentially punished them for being allied with the Nazis. The Mufti, they had a Arabic radio station in Berlin that broadcast until pretty much Berlin fell. That sent out. They went into Bosnia. They recruited SS members from Muslim SS group out of Bosnia. I mean, it was bad basically. That was the group that chose that basically like, hey, we're going to ally with the Nazis because they want to wipe out the Jews. We want to wipe out the Jews. They believe some weird superior Aryan race shit. We're down with that. We kind of believe that because you got to remember, Aryan means things that are like all really different to different cultures. Like Iran literally means Aryan, and they don't look like blonde hair, blue eye, tall people. It was essentially they wanted to wipe out the Jews. I mean, and this makes sense if you think about it logically when you realize like Japan and Germany were allies. And like, oh, the Germans were like uber racist, right? Well, yeah, they were, but they also got along just fine with the Japanese Empire. Those people look nothing. I mean, that's like the opposite of blonde hair, blue eye, and tall. These guys were short, dark haired, dark eyes, like completely different ethnically than the Germans were, and they got along perfectly fine with them. So it's not really a huge surprise that they would basically, that's their friends in Asia, and then their friends in the Middle East were essentially these Muslim groups that were like, hey, they're doing a good thing here, talking about the Jews and trying to kill them. So let's join them. Anyway, that was basically the setup that led to the Muslim Brotherhood being as powerful as they were, and it's basically the seed that has caused the problems in the Middle East for both the Israelis and the Arab countries. For decades, right? They've recently lost a lot of power. And the reason why they lost a lot of power is because the United States counterterrorism has gotten really good. Local counterterrorism has gotten really good. And they've now lost 2 bets, the Muslim Brotherhood. One, they bet on Al-Qaeda and its global network being the next caliphate. They lost terribly. They even lost in Iraq, even though Iraq happened and they recruited a bunch of people. Well, guess what? They all went into Fallujah and they died. They got hit really hard. And then round 2, which was ISIS, that got completely obliterated. The Russians fought them. The Syrians fought them. The Israelis fought them. Even the Iranians fought them. And obviously the United States fought them. The Iraqis did a shitty job, but they did technically fight them. The Saudis fought them. Jordanians fought them. Everybody fought them. And they put all their eggs in this new caliphate, and it just completely exploded. So Muslim Brotherhood is in a very, very weak position. I would say they're probably in a stronger position in the West under their various covers like CARE and whatnot than they are in the Middle East right now. Because in the Middle East, if you are a Muslim Brotherhood member or suspected of it, and they let's just say they find it out, you're just disappearing in the middle of the night, and then they're burying you in a ditch. In the West, you get to join CARE and have the ACLU defend you. But I'm not saying that we shouldn't give people due process, but basically the Saudis, all these other particularly Sunni Arab groups, they saw that the Muslim Brotherhood was getting weak, and they took full advantage of that and started purging them. So now you can make a deal with the Israelis, and you don't have to worry as much about basically a bunch of nutcases rising up and destroying your country or killing you personally for doing this. Still could happen, absolutely. But the risk has now been substantially lowered. Second part. I was 10 minutes explaining essentially Muslim Brotherhood things that have delayed going on. Second part of what's going on. Palestine. The Palestinians specifically, and even more specifically Hamas and Hezbollah. So Hezbollah are essentially the Iranians' lackeys. It's the Iranian satellite state in Lebanon, also northern Palestine. They don't play nice with anybody. All right, Iranians don't play nice with anybody. Hezbollah doesn't play nice with anybody. They bully the Lebanese, and these other Arab states, particularly the Sunni Arab states, don't want Hezbollah anywhere near them. So when they try to support the Palestinians, and that involves supporting Hezbollah, it makes it a really tough pill to swallow. And they've decided to stop swallowing that pill because they don't want to help them. Hamas has had years and years and years of corruption, and they've done this to themselves. What Hamas's MO is, what they would always do, and this is a repeated pattern since, honestly, the 80s. You could probably track it back even further. They get a bunch of money from the Arab world to rebuild for the people of Palestine, right? And then the party leaders pocket half of it, and then the rest of it's squandered or spent on weapons. And then when they run out of money and they realize they don't have an economy, they fire those weapons and said rockets that are usually Iranian-made at Israel. Israel then, of course, retaliates. They place the missile battery. The Palestinians Hamas will place essentially their missile batteries on top of schools or near hospitals, and they want to make sure as much collateral damage as possible is caused. And if there is no collateral damage, they'll just make it up. They'll just throw funerals for people who aren't even dead. I swear, like, you can look this up. There's unbelievable amounts of videos of just Palestinians making really strange claims, like a piece of concrete fell off a hospital, and say, "Oh yeah, an Israeli tank did that." And it's like, do you know what an Israeli tank shell does? Like, that's a whole that looks like maybe an AK round caused that, not a tank. But they campaign and they say, "Oh my God, the Israelis, they're bombing hospitals, they're killing all these people," which the Israelis don't do. And then all this money pours in from all these sympathetic Arab states, and they say, "Oh, you poor babies, please now feed your people and strengthen yourselves so that you can fight these evil Jews." And then what happens? Well, the same thing. Hamas, their party members pocket about half the money. Some of it is spent on weapons, and the rest is squandered. And the Palestinians live in dirt. They just go to their madrasas and they get their television where there's big guys in SpongeBob costumes selling them that the Jews are pigs and monkeys and stuff, and they just perpetuate this cycle of hate and bullshit. The Arab states are sick of basically sending them money because the Israelis, they want to trade with these Arab states. The Israelis, by trading with the Arab states, make money, and vice versa. And the Arab states get all the luxuries and technologies and access essentially to the West through Israel. And particularly, it brings them in for closer, easier relations with the United States and Europe by basically also being friends with Israel. Basically, you're not going to take this microchip we're selling you to make your computers run fast or to program a missile to blow up Israel, right? Because these are the kind of things you have to consider when you're selling technology to Middle Eastern countries. But if you're allies with Israel, if you have a peace accord with Israel, if you're actively trading with Israel and you're all making money, then those concerns kind of evaporate. And you end up having a lot easier time getting things you want, improving the quality of life of your people and yourself, let's be honest. And everybody makes money, and it's great. It works out good. But the Palestinians, they've overplayed their hand. They've done this over and over and over again, and they've let Hamas run the show. Hamas used to be a shadow organization. Hamas used to be essentially the militant wing of the PLO, or basically the Palestinian. There was the political people, and then there was the militant people, and they used to be separate. And then, because power corrupts, they just want more and more and more power. Now they're the ones they are the party. Hamas is the party, and Hezbollah is the party in the north, basically. They're the ones calling the shots. So now there's no more we support the Palestinian people, but not Hamas. Now it's, if you give money to Palestine, you are giving money directly to Hamas, which is what the U.S. shouldn't be giving the money we give. It's just said no. Oh, the children. It's you're holding your children hostage. Why don't you sell some of your ballistic missiles that you normally fire at the Israelis and feed those people if you're really that concerned? Or open up your economy, maybe, Or how about all the billions of dollars we've given you before? Where the hell did that go? Why are these people still living in dirt? So, tough love, right? But the Arab states now, they're sick of the Hamas bullshit. They're sick of their bullshit, and they know it's just better for everybody all around if they just strike into a peace agreement with Israel. And I suspect more and more of these Sunni states are going to jump on board. They're going to do it slowly. They're going to test the water. I mean, you see UAE did it, and then Bahrain did it, and now all these other, the Saudis might be doing it. The Saudi Arabia does that. That's a huge. Everybody will do it. The Saudis do it. Everybody will do it, with the exception of like Iran, basically. We'll see what happens. But this is a good thing, and this can only be done because the president was firm. He put the right people in, and he actually talked to people, and he didn't act like he was, divine and smart, and he wasn't playing footsies with the Iranians, and basically he was the complete opposite of the Obama administration. That's why this was able to occur. And if you'll indulge me by going back to 2017, we don't even have to go back that far. 2017, what happened in 2017? That was a big foreign policy Middle East thing. Well, President Trump moved the U.S. Embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem, recognizing Jerusalem as Israel's capital. And what happened? The media, and particularly all the foreign policy analysts and surrogates, particularly from the last administration, all came out and they said this was going to make Middle East peace impossible. It was going to be, this was sure to lead the war, and this is such an amateur move. Blah, blah, blah. Just these people are still on TV, and they're still writing books, and they're still being taken seriously as foreign policy analysis. But they said this. They said that basically now everything's impossible because Trump did this thing that they didn't want to have done. What he really needed to do was have us bend over and send another $1 billion to the Iranians, right? That was somehow going to make things more peaceful. No. You don't play ball with people who are not playing ball in good faith. But anyway, so these people in 2017 all said this was going to lead to disaster. Now here we are, really, 2-3 years later from kind of the actual movement occurring, and now these other Arab countries are saying, you know what, we're down with Israel. We've had a rough past, but we don't want to kill each other. Let's get our ties closer and start talking to each other. Morocco and Israel now have direct flights. That was banned before. Now immediately they haven't signed on to the peace treaty, but they did say, whatever. So what if people can travel back and forth? It's fine. It's the little things, But my point being is that these analysts all came out of the woodwork back in 2017 to denounce essentially the president's foreign policy, denounce who he was putting on the foreign policy, bitching about Pompeo, bitching about what's his face, even the oil guy before who was in charge. He didn't fit the bill. He didn't work as out, but he still was head and shoulders choice above who was running the show before. Your Hillary Clintons, your John Kerrys. It's kind of ridiculous, and I wish I had been making videos back in 2017 so that you could hear me say this was a good move and this is a good thing for peace in the Middle East. This is a strong showing, and this will work out okay to counter what these other people were saying, because that is what I was saying. I just I wasn't doing videos, so now I can be proven right. And these people can be proven wrong. And you gotta remember, these people, I'm not paid to analyze for anybody, but these people are paid thousands, in many cases millions of dollars to basically say whatever crap they need to say to push their agenda, even if it's really shitty analysis. And they're making tons of money, and they're still on CNN, and they're still on MSNBC, and they're still writing their books, and they're still part of the think tanks and stuff. It's not that you analysts can't get stuff wrong sometimes, because you inevitably will, because you don't always have all of the information, and sometimes you're just gonna people will surprise you. Sometimes something will just happen that's completely out of left field, and you're like, well, we expected this to occur, and now it's not this occurred. But there's people who don't negotiate in good faith, and that's pretty much the majority of what we have in terms of the talking heads on TV and part of the foreign policy apparatus in the United States right now. It's people who do not talk in good faith. They're pushing an agenda. They're not and the agenda is usually not peace. The agenda is usually whatever I guess makes them money. I don't know. I mean, That's the thing. Well, why was there so much war and shit going on during the Obama administration when he was brought in and they kept saying, "Oh yeah, we're gonna appease the Iranians and do all this other stuff." Like he sounded like Neville Chamberlain when he was talking to these people, and he went over in his Middle East tour and he just apologized for America, right? Did President Trump ever go over and did he apologize for America? No. He just said, "We are who we are, and you guys got to clean up your own backyard because we're sick of doing it." I get it. U.S., we come in, we're like a bull in China shop, and we break things and we make mistakes. I got it. You know, he's not somebody. You know, basically, I didn't support the Iraq War, but we did it, and I'm not gonna say that. You know, oh, we apologize for that because we're not sorry. This is the kind of stuff that happens when you guys don't have your shit together. So we're gonna respect you enough to think that you are adults and you will be able to get your shit together. And it turns out, talking to them like adults and being firm and being strong, they respected that. Who would have thought, right? Who would have thought, except every person like me who, you know, actually gets this analysis shit right, but we're not on MSNBC or CNN or in the Fox News panel, you know, just because you got to have a counter voice. You're always going to have different people who have different opinions or different nuances or no more, no less. But you don't need to just bring somebody on who's got the counter opinion just so that they can have it, because their opinion might not be that valid. Every one of these analysts who are on MSNBC, even people like John Kerry, people who are personally invested in essentially what the outcome is, people who have, you know, the really major political biases and whatnot in terms of like in their analysis, where they continually get these things wrong over and over and over again. They're constantly wrong in terms of basically the way things play out, particularly in the Middle East, particularly foreign policy. They're screaming their heads off about Russia, and they don't know anything about Russia. And they ignore the Chinese, and they have no idea how to deal with the Chinese. These people, they're paid a lot of money to be experts, and they suck. They all suck, and you shouldn't listen to any of them, because basically, if it doesn't pass the smell test, if you think that it's like, if they're saying, oh, it's so highbrow you couldn't possibly understand, they're full of shit. These people don't actually know how to negotiate. They don't know how to do anything. They just like getting, you know, paraded around with all the diplomacy and stabbing each other in the back and making money. That's what they do. You know, these left-wingers who go on MSNBC and CNN, they get paid shitloads of money by think tanks and by the TV stations just to say stuff that's negative about, you know, the president or about whoever. They don't know. Their analysis is garbage. Don't trust any of them. Don't trust any of them. They're all full of shit.